Big-10 just brought in two new head coaches. Matt Rhule and Luke Fickell will be going to Nebraska and Wisconsin, respectively. Kyle, a little better. My question to you is, out of these two, who do you think is going to be the better hire?
Wow, that's a good question. I'm going to go with Wisconsin because it's easier to win at Wisconsin than it is at Nebraska. It is really hard to recruit at Nebraska in the 21st century. Like Tom Osborne being able to build what they had in the 80s and 90s is kind of ridiculous. And they did it by having like fun, innovative high school offenses. But yeah, I would go with Wisconsin. I like Luke Fickell being the hire there because he's been connected to every big job for the last few years. For those who don't know, he was the Cincinnati coach. They went 11-1 and played in the New Year's Six game that the Group of Five conference gets. And then obviously the next year went undefeated, got that ceremonial fourth playoff spot, which was a victory for the Group of Five. And now Cincinnati's headed to the Big 12. Luke Fickell's going to move on up to Wisconsin, which before you add in the Big 10 money, I think Wisconsin is a program that you could look at and say, you can do actual damage at Wisconsin because they might not be in the camp of getting like 4 and 5 star recruits consistently. I think they're kind of in that tier 2, tier 3 group when it comes to recruiting. But I mean, Wisconsin has done more with less pretty consistently over the last 15 years, at least as long as I've been watching college football. So I'm going to say Fickell has a better chance of walking away as the better hire. And therefore, I'm going to lean with him and Wisconsin being the better hire.
You say it's hard to get 4 and 5 star recruits to go to Wisconsin, but hell, Luke Fickell was getting 4 and 5 star recruits to go to Cincinnati. When I look at Sauce Gardner playing on Sundays, Luke Fickell does an excellent job at recruiting talent to go to smaller universities. So what's he going to do now that he has the Big 10 in his back pocket, that he has Wisconsin? You talk about it being easier to win there. I remember it wasn't that long ago, and which also kind of made that they're firing their head coach that much weirder this past, season, was that they were knocking on the door of kind of being a playoff team. It just, they always would kind of come up short. And then eventually you have Urban Meyer and then Ryan Day taking over at Ohio State, elevating that program to a point in which Wisconsin couldn't contend. And now you look at what Jim Harbaugh is doing with Michigan, making it that much harder for Wisconsin to really ascend in the conference. Shifting gears a little bit to Matt Rhule. With Matt Rhule, the question mark is going to be, can he just immediately go back to what he was doing at Baylor? These last 3 years with the Carolina Panthers, that they had all ruined him or sour his name to recruits, and he didn't even take that year off. No, instead, he's just instantly going back into the pool, going into a program with big-time expectations in Nebraska. Whether those expectations are just is a different conversation. I think you still can win at Nebraska. I don't think that that's an impossibility. It's just changing the definition of what win is, right? Like, are we talking about win be 8, 9 wins, 10 wins that maybe consistently every other year? Or we talk about winning the Big 10 itself, which is going to get so much harder in the next couple of years because, hell, we're even forgetting USC, UCLA, they're coming to this conference, which just is going to make competition that much more rigorous. Can they get to a playoff? We're going to see expanded playoffs coming up here. So that's going to be two things for Luke Fickell and Matt Rhule. Hell, Luke Fickell showed he could do it again at Cincinnati. So why can't he do it at Wisconsin? I think that they're two great hires for different reasons. I think that Matt Rhule is going to have more to prove coming off the NFL experience, though.
Yeah, and Matt Rhule's in an interesting place because going to the NFL and going back to college always changes coaches. Like, you do things differently when you've had that experience. And I mean, this is Matt Rhule's third different job in 5 years, which I think is super interesting. All very different jobs, I will say also. Like, rebuilding Baylor after a massive scandal of systemically overlooking sexual assault on campuses and everything that happened with Art Briles, like from that situation into the NFL and the Carolina Panthers, now taking over this Nebraska program, like 3 different jobs in 5 years that are 3 very, very different experiences when we're talking about Matt Rhule's coaching job. Now, I will also say, adding on to the Wisconsin point, the last 26 years, Wisconsin has made a bowl game 24 times. Brett Bielema, who was the coach in the 2000s, made 3 consecutive Rose Bowls and then left the program kind of because there was a falling out and a weird exit at Wisconsin. But Wisconsin has had 4 10-win seasons under Paul Chryst, the previous coach. They made a Rose Bowl, they made a Cotton Bowl, they made an Orange Bowl. Like, Wisconsin has been pretty consistently like a tier 3 program. or a tier 2 program at times. They had 3 top 10 finishes in 7 years. So like, if that's the standard, I don't think it's impossible that Fickell gets there within 2 to 3 years. Like, I think they could turn that ship around real quick. Not to say Nebraska can't turn the ship around real quick. I think, like you said, the expectation for Wisconsin is to get back to like 10 wins. The expectation for Nebraska is like, can we be NC State? If we can be NC State and win 8 games every year, we're kind of chill.
With Nebraska, and this is part of the frustration that eventually led to Scott Frost getting his termination papers, was they just lost too many coin flip games. And that grew very frustrating for the fan base to really take in over the last couple of years, because you were selling your fan base too on, hey, if we just turn around these coin flip games, we'll be back in contention in no time. And then this season started, and again, you're losing these same games in the same ways, and you're blowing huge leads, and you're going for onside kicks. And that's why Scott Frost needed to go. Matt Rhule, if you were to go back to his style of coaching, very CEO type, which I think is obviously perfect for that college environment, culture building, right? We're talking about changing the culture, what he was able to do at Baylor. You need to completely change the culture in Nebraska if you want that program to start producing at the high levels that it was back in the day. My second question to you here is, now with these two coaches that we know have winning track records going to the Big-10, do you think the Big-10 now has the coaching advantage in college football?
Compared to the SEC?
Compared to any conference, but I guess primarily the SEC, as those two conferences have been the top dogs.
I would say it's kind of a toss-up in terms of like coaching prowess, shall we say. I don't know if Fickell and Matt Rhule really changed the tide that much, although Auburn just hired that weirdo Hugh Freeze, so maybe that the tides are swinging in the other
Hugh
direction.
Hugh Freeze, the guy that just lost to my Aggies, guns up, right? Alma mater actually surprising with a 30-point victory over Liberty. Who saw that coming? Not Vegas.
Rare New Mexico State content in the middle of your Big Ten college football breakdown.
Not the school I was planning on mentioning or even talking about. Hell, I've shifted gears entirely. I got a Texas helmet on my desk.
Yeah, but you got to shout out for the alma mater, especially when they were like gonna quit football 3 years ago. So good on them. Like, yeah, they beat that weirdo Hugh Freeze. Yeah. But yeah, I mean,
looking around the SEC, okay, obviously we know Nick Saban, made man, doesn't have to prove anything. Kirby Smart, made man, doesn't have to prove anything. These guys obviously win national titles. But Heupel, Jimbo Fisher, okay. If I look at the Big-10, looking what Harbaugh's done, Ryan Day's done, Kirk Ferentz, he's been a long timer out there. Mel Tucker turned around Michigan State last year, and now they're kind of back. They're back down to earth after Kenneth Walker left. But if you told me they came back next year, I could see it. James Franklin, what he's done with Penn State. And then the conference is going to get even better, because coming years, Lincoln Riley will then be an addition to said conference, along with Chip Kelly, who turned around UCLA.
UCLA had their best season in 8 years this year, and that was winning 9 games, which, by the way, if Nebraska won 6 games next year, it would be their best season in 8 years, because y'all, Nebraska hasn't made a bowl game since 2016. And this year they're going to let 5 and 7 teams make bowl games. Do you know how hard it is to not make a bowl game for 7 consecutive seasons in college football? It's so hard to be that bad. And Scott Frost never making a bowl game is like, yeah, of course he's not going to get to keep his job. That's kind of sad, especially given the Big Ten West had no good teams this year, and still 4 of them made bowl games this year. Wisconsin made a bowl game this year. It literally doesn't matter, but yeah.
So I would say the Big Ten, in terms of coaches, I think is a lot deeper than the SEC.
So here's the interesting thing about the SEC. There have been 10 different hirings in the last 3 cycles going into this year. So the 3 years prior to this year, 9 of the 14 coaches changed jobs. 2 jobs had 2 firings. Mississippi State fired a coach, then fired another coach. But basically, there's been a turnover of 70% of the conference in the last 3 years. And 3 years is about the amount of time it takes to figure out whether a program is right or wrong. In the case of Auburn, Brian Harsin was kind of an ass, and so they had cause to terminate him early. But basically, it's hard to gauge what the depth of the SEC is, because all these coaches are brand new. I mean, Sam Pittman's in his 3rd year at Arkansas, but
again, it's part of it, right? That's kind of part of it. That's kind of built into why I would say it's obviously deeper, because we can trust that these guys are going to be around for a few years. I know they were trying to run Jim Harbaugh out the door a couple of years ago at Michigan but now he's there as long as he wants to stay, even though I know the NFL teams are going to be knocking on Jim's door every day. And we'll see it too, like a guy like Fickell, who, if he tops out at Wisconsin, I'm sure a couple of years from now, you might see a similar kind of push for NFL teams to look into Luke Fickell's direction. But I think they're two good hirings. I'm curious to see how Matt Rhule does in his return to college. I can't be easy coming off of what he had to deal with the Carolina Panthers. I think if you're Nebraska and you're looking to kind of like retune the mood around campus, I think Matt Rhule's a good hire in that respect. Anyway, guys, what do you think of these two? Do you think Luke Fickell or Matt Rhule will have better success at their respective programs? Drop below in the comment section. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias. From Kyle Ledbetter and Juju, stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you on the next one.